Part 1. The Mockery. The sound of tearing fabric cut through the cramped briefing room like a combat knife through canvas. Lieutenant Jack Steele, a 6'4" mountain of SEAL Team 6 muscle, gripped Sergeant Emma Carter's medical blouse with both hands and ripped it from collar to chest. The torn fabric hit the concrete floor with a soft thud that somehow echoed louder than gunfire in the sudden silence. "I don't need a goddamn babysitter," Steele's voice thundered through the room, spittle flying from his lips as his face twisted with rage. Emma stood frozen, her 5'2" frame dwarfed by the towering operator, her trembling hands clutching her medical kit against her chest like a shield that couldn't protect her from what was happening. 12 SEAL operators formed a circle around her, their eyes carrying the cold calculation of predators sizing up prey. Master Chief Mike Rodriguez, a weathered 55-year-old veteran of Desert Storm with 3 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star, watched from the corner, his leathered face unreadable. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Wallace, the team's senior corpsman who'd patched more bullet holes than most surgeons ever would, crossed thick arms over his chest. Petty Officer Frank Jenkins, the youngest at 28 but already with the 1,000-yard stare of men twice his age, kicked a metal chair across the room. It crashed against the wall inches from Emma's head. "Listen up, Band-Aid girl." Steele stepped closer, his breath reeking of tobacco and last night's whiskey washing over her face. "Tomorrow, we're running patrol through Sector 7, Taliban country. You'll be dead in the first 5 minutes, and I'm not letting any of my boys risk their lives trying to save some worthless medic who can't even look a real warrior in the eye." His massive hand shot out, grabbing her collar and lifting her clean off the ground, her boots dangling helplessly as she struggled to breathe. Emma didn't cry out, didn't beg. Her small brown eyes locked onto his, steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The door burst open with military precision, and Colonel James Harrison strode in. At 62, the colonel's once black hair had faded to iron gray, but his ramrod posture and piercing blue eyes carried the authority of a man who'd commanded respect across 4 decades of service. His sharp gaze took in the scene in an instant. The torn fabric on the floor, Emma's disheveled state, the SEALs standing in a predatory circle. What the hell is going on here? His voice cut through the testosterone-thick air like a blade. Steele straightened but didn't bother to hide his contempt. "Colonel, we need a real combat medic, not this," he gestured dismissively at Emma. "Liability. She's going to get good men killed." Harrison's jaw tightened as he stepped forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Sergeant Carter is my personal selection for this mission, Lieutenant. She stays. That's a direct order." The SEALs erupted in angry mutters. Phantom, Thompson, the team's sniper, with 42 confirmed kills across 3 continents, grabbed a water bottle and hurled it against the wall near Emma's head. Water exploded across the concrete, droplets hitting her face like shrapnel. "This is bullshit," he shouted. "We don't babysit in the teams." Harrison took another step forward, closing the distance between himself and Thompson until they were inches apart. "One more outburst, and you'll be explaining to Admiral Morrison why his premier team can't follow simple orders. Dismissed." The SEALs filed out, each one making sure to bump Emma's shoulder as they passed. Steele was last, pausing to lean down, his lips inches from her ear. "You better pray to whatever God you believe in that tomorrow goes smooth. Because if it doesn't, if one of my boys gets hurt because of you." He let the threat hang in the air, then straightened and walked out, leaving Emma alone with the colonel. Harrison waited until the door closed before speaking. "I know what they did was wrong, Sergeant, but I need you on this mission. Can you handle it?" Emma finally found her voice, quiet but steady. "Yes, sir. I can handle it." Harrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Get yourself cleaned up. Briefing at 600 hours." As the colonel left, Emma bent to pick up the torn pieces of her uniform, her hands finally steady. She'd been through worse, much worse. The memory hit her like a physical blow as she folded the torn fabric. Another time, another place, but the same dismissive voices. Send a real operator, not some girl playing soldier. That had been 3 years ago, in a place that didn't officially exist, during a mission that never happened. She pushed the memory down, locked it away with all the others. The mess hall was its usual chaos of loud voices and clattering trays. Emma found an empty table in the corner, preferring solitude to the inevitable confrontation that would come from sitting with others. She'd barely started eating when someone upended a bottle of hot sauce over her tray. Red liquid pooled like blood across her food. "Spice it up, sweetheart." Frank Jenkins laughed, high-fiving another SEAL as they walked past. "Gotta toughen up that soft stomach for tomorrow." A napkin appeared in her peripheral vision. Sergeant Kate Miller, one of the few other women on base, slid it across the table before sitting down uninvited. "They're assholes," Miller said quietly, watching the SEALs congregate at their usual table like wolves around a kill. "What they're doing isn't right." Emma wiped the sauce from her tray, salvaging what she could of her meal. "I've had worse." The words came out flat, carrying weight that made Miller's eyes widen slightly. Miller leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but you need to check out Building 3's basement. There's something there about you." Emma's hand stilled on her fork. "You've got the wrong person." Miller shook her head. "Building 3 basement. There's something there you should see. Just be careful tomorrow. Some of us know you deserve better than this." As Miller walked away, Emma noticed Master Chief Rodriguez watching from across the room. The senior enlisted SEAL's expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a calculating look she'd seen before. He was piecing something together, connecting dots others had missed. The afternoon brought mandatory range time, and the SEALs made sure Emma was last in line. They took their positions with the casual arrogance of elite warriors, their shots grouping tight at 300 meters. "Watch and learn how real operators shoot," Steele called out, his rounds punching perfect holes in the center mass of his target. The others followed suit, their marksmanship a display of years of training and countless rounds downrange. Thompson, true to his Phantom nickname, placed 5 shots in a 1-inch group at 600 meters with his Macmillan TAC 338 rifle, the kind of shooting that made even veteran snipers whistle in appreciation. When Emma's turn came, Jenkins accidentally kicked her ammo can, sending rounds scattering across the concrete. "Oops," he said with a grin that held all the warmth of a predator's smile. "Butterfingers." The rangemaster, a grizzled army sergeant with more combat tours than all the SEALs combined, just shook his head and waited. Emma knelt, collecting the scattered ammunition with the same methodical patience she'd shown all day. She loaded her magazine, movement smooth and economical, then took her position. The M110 semi-automatic sniper system felt familiar in her hands, an old friend she hadn't visited in too long. She settled into her stance, and something shifted in the air. The SEALs' laughter died as they watched her body naturally flow into a shooting position that screamed of advanced training. Her breathing slowed, the world narrowing to the front sight post and the target beyond. 5 shots, 5 seconds. The rangemaster called ceasefire and ran the target back. 5 holes so tightly grouped they looked like a single ragged wound, all headshots at 300 meters. The silence stretched until Jenkins muttered, "Lucky shots. Anyone can get lucky once." But Steele wasn't looking at the target. He was staring at Emma's stance, at the way she'd controlled the rifle's recoil, at shooting fundamentals that took years to perfect. His eyes narrowed, but before he could speak, she'd already cleared her weapon and stepped back, face as blank as morning fog. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around Fob Chapman like a burial shroud as Emma made her way to the briefing room. 0545 hours, 15 minutes early, but the SEALs were already there, their faces painted with the casual confidence of men who'd never met a situation they couldn't shoot their way out of. She took a seat in the back, trying to become invisible, but Steele's voice cut through her attempt at anonymity. "Well, look who showed up. Thought you might have developed a sudden case of combat stress." The laughter was cruel, predatory. Thompson made a show of checking his medical pouch. "Got my own Band-Aids, Lieutenant. We good to leave her behind?" Colonel Harrison entered before Steele could respond, his presence immediately commanding attention. The briefing was straightforward. A presence patrol through Sector 7, showing the flag in an area where Taliban influence had been growing. Simple in theory, deadly in practice. The route would take them through the Tangji Valley, a narrow corridor flanked by high ground on both sides. Perfect ambush country. As Harrison outlined the mission, Emma found herself studying the terrain map with growing unease. Something about the patrol route nagged at her, a familiarity that she couldn't quite place. "Questions?" Harrison asked as the briefing concluded. Emma raised her hand, earning groans from the SEALs. "Sir, the route takes us through a natural choke point at grid reference 38 Romeo Quebec Mike. Shouldn't we consider—" Steele cut her off with a bark of laughter. "The medic wants to play tactician now. Stick to your lane, Cooper. Leave the operational planning to the operators." The other SEALs joined in the mockery, but Emma noticed Wallace and Rodriguez exchange glances. They'd seen the same thing she had. The route was dangerous, predictable, but Steele's ego wouldn't allow him to consider input from someone he'd already dismissed as worthless. The convoy consisted of 4 up-armored Humvees, and surprise, surprise, Emma was assigned to the last vehicle, tail end Charlie, the most vulnerable position. She climbed in to find herself surrounded by 3 of Steele's most vocal supporters, including Jenkins, who greeted her with a sneer. "Try not to puke when the shooting starts, princess. Blood's a lot different when it's not in your nice, clean medical textbooks." Emma secured her gear and checked her rifle, movements automatic after years of practice. As the convoy began to roll, she found herself unconsciously checking her equipment again. Fingers finding the hidden supplies, the ketamine, the extra surgical kit, the tools for procedures most medics never attempted because most medics hadn't been where she'd been, hadn't learned from who she'd learned from. "Sector 7 and 5 mics," the lead vehicle reported. The Tangi Valley opened before them like a mouth waiting to swallow them whole. High ground on both sides, boulder fields perfect for concealing fighters, and that damn choke point coming up fast. Emma keyed her radio, tried once more. "Red 1, this is Red 4. Recommend we—" "Red 4, maintain radio discipline," Steele's voice crackled back, dripping with disdain. "Save the chatter for calling in our position when you inevitably freeze up." Jenkins laughed. "LT's got your number, Doc. Maybe when we get back you can transfer to somewhere safer. I hear the dining facility needs—" The world exploded. Part 2. The Ambush. The IED detonated directly under the second vehicle, lifting the multi-ton Humvee into the air like a toy. It came down on its side, flames already licking at the fuel tank. Then the mountains erupted with small arms fire, the distinctive crack of AK-47s mixing with the whoosh of RPGs. Contact, 360 degrees. The radio exploded with voices as Emma's training took over. She was out of the vehicle before conscious thought caught up, medical kit in hand, rifle slung, moving toward the destroyed Humvee as bullets snapped past her head like angry hornets. Inside the burning vehicle, she could see movement. Someone was alive. The SEALs were returning fire, their training evident in the disciplined volleys, but they were pinned down. Another RPG streaked across the valley, impacting near the lead vehicle. This wasn't a harassment attack. This was a deliberate, well-planned ambush. Emma reached the overturned Humvee, the heat from the flames searing her face. 2 SEALs were trapped inside, one unconscious, the other screaming as flames licked at his legs. Without hesitation, she dove through the twisted doorframe. The heat was overwhelming, smoke filling her lungs as she grabbed the conscious SEAL. Peterson, her mind supplied through the chaos. She dragged him out, his screams piercing through the gunfire, then dove back for the unconscious one. The flames were spreading, ammunition starting to cook off. She grabbed the second man under the arms and pulled with strength born of desperation and something more, something earned in places whose names were classified. As she cleared the vehicle, it exploded, the concussion throwing her forward. She covered the wounded with her body as shrapnel whistled overhead. "Medic!" The cry came from the lead vehicle, then another from the third. Everyone was taking casualties. Emma looked at the 2 men she'd pulled from the burning Humvee. Peterson had second-degree burns on his legs but would live. The other, Kowalski, was bleeding from a head wound, but breathing. She made the combat medic's impossible choice and moved toward the loudest screams. Her movement pattern was unlike any medic the SEALs had seen. She didn't run in a straight line, but flowed from cover to cover, timing her movements with the enemy's fire patterns. When she reached the lead vehicle, she found exactly what she'd feared. Steel was down. The RPG had detonated against the vehicle's armor, and while it hadn't penetrated, the spalling had done its work. Steel lay half out of the commander's hatch, his abdomen torn open, intestines spilling out like grotesque party streamers. His eyes, which hours ago had looked at her with such contempt, now held only terror and pain. "Help me," he gasped, blood frothing from his lips. "Please." Emma's hands moved without hesitation, cutting away his gear to assess the damage. It was bad, catastrophically bad, the kind of wound that killed men while their buddies watched helplessly. But Emma had seen worse, had fixed worse, in places where failure meant more than one death, where the mission depended on keeping key personnel alive against all odds. "Red 4, what's your status?" Wallace's voice crackled through her earpiece. He was pinned down near the third vehicle, treating his own casualties. "Red 4 has multiple Category Alpha casualties," she responded, using the medical terminology for those who needed immediate evacuation and surgery. "Need you to maintain your position. I've got this." "Cooper, he needs a surgeon, not a—" Wallace's transmission cut off as another explosion rocked the valley. The Taliban were pressing their attack, trying to overrun the convoy. Emma made her decision. From her kit, she pulled supplies no regular medic carried. The ketamine went in first, enough to take the edge off, but not enough to knock Steel out completely. She needed him conscious, needed him fighting to live. "Listen to me," she said, her voice cutting through his panic. "This is going to hurt like nothing you've ever felt, but you're going to live. Do you understand? You are going to live." Her hands worked with a speed and precision that spoke of darker places, harder choices. She packed the wound, clamping bleeders with an expertise that went beyond standard combat medicine. When she sutured the intestines, a procedure that should have been impossible under fire, her hands never trembled despite the bullets impacting inches away. But the enemy fire was intensifying. RPGs were bracketing their position, and the SEALs were running low on ammunition. They needed support, and they needed it now. That's when Emma did something that would later be classified in the after-action report. She switched her radio to a frequency she shouldn't have known, using call signs that weren't supposed to exist. "Firehawk 6, this is Ghost 7-1, troops in contact. Danger close fire mission, Grid 38 Romeo Quebec Mike 4521. Say again, danger close. Friendlies marked by IR strobes. Time on target now, now, now." The radio went silent, then a voice, confused but professional. "Ghost 7-1, authenticate Echo Charlie." Without missing a beat, while still working on Steele's wounds, Emma rattled off an authentication code that had been burned into her memory 3 years ago. Another pause. Then, "Ghost 7-1, Firehawk 6, rounds inbound, 30 seconds, get your people down." "All red elements, take cover," Emma broadcast on the tactical net. "Artillery inbound, danger close." She threw herself over Steel as the world turned to thunder and flame. The barrage was precisely placed, walking up the ridgelines where the Taliban fighters had positioned themselves. Each round landed exactly where it would do the most damage to the enemy while avoiding the convoy. It was the kind of fire direction that took years to master. The kind that came from calling in strikes while bullets whined overhead and friends died around you. The artillery had broken the ambush, but the fight wasn't over. Taliban fighters, stunned but not defeated, began to regroup for another assault. Emma could hear their commanders shouting in Pashto, trying to rally their forces. She understood every word, another skill that wasn't in her official file. They were planning to rush the convoy, accepting casualties to overrun the Americans. But first, she had to finish saving Steel. Working with one hand while firing her M4 with the other, she completed the field surgery that should have been impossible. Steele's intestines were back inside, held in place by sutures that would make textbook surgeons weep with envy. The bleeding was controlled, his vitals stabilizing. He would live if they could get out of this valley. Ghost 7-1, Firehawk 6, second mission ready. Call the ball. The artillery was ready for another strike, but Emma could see the problem. The Taliban were too close now. Danger close had become troops in contact. Any artillery now would be as likely to kill Americans as enemies. Firehawk 6, Ghost 7-1, negative on second mission. Friendlies and enemies intermingled. We're going to have to do this the hard way. She switched frequencies again. Dust off 3-3, Ghost 7-1. I need immediate medevac at grid 3-8, Romeo Quebec Mike 4521. Multiple category alpha casualties. Hot LZ. How copy? The medical evacuation pilot's voice came back, tense but determined. Ghost 7-1, dust off 3-3. Roger on Hot LZ. ETA 8 mics. 8 minutes in a firefight? 8 minutes was a lifetime. Several lifetimes. Emma looked around at the convoy situation. Half the SEALs were wounded. Ammunition was running low. And the Taliban were pressing closer. They wouldn't last 8 minutes unless something changed. That's when Master Chief Rodriguez appeared at her side, blood streaming from a graze on his temple. "Cooper," he said, and there was something different in his voice now. Respect. "That fire mission was textbook. Where the hell did you—" His question was cut off by the distinctive crack of a Dragunov sniper rifle. A SEAL in the third vehicle crumpled. "Sniper, 2 o'clock, approximately 400 meters," someone called out. Emma was already moving. She grabbed the nearest rifle with a scope, an M110, and found a position. Through the scope, she could see the muzzle flash from the Taliban sniper's hide. The shot would be difficult. Uphill, through smoke, with wind, she could feel but not accurately measure. But she'd made harder shots in worse conditions when more than just her life depended on it. She took a breath, let half out, and squeezed. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and 400 meters away, the Taliban sniper slumped over his weapon. "Jesus Christ," Jenkins breathed. He'd been watching, had seen the shot that most trained snipers would have found challenging. But there was no time for amazement. The Taliban were making their final push, fighters streaming down from the ridgelines in a human wave assault. This was it. Do or die time. Emma made a choice that would haunt her dreams but save lives. She pulled out her tactical tablet, fingers flying over the screen. "All red elements," she broadcast. "Marking enemy positions with IR laser. Continuous wave. Keep your heads down." From her kit, she produced an infrared laser designator, another piece of equipment no normal medic would carry. She began painting Taliban positions, the invisible beam marking targets for something the enemy wouldn't see coming. High above, an AC-130 gunship that had been loitering outside the operations area received new targeting data. The pilot's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Ghost 7-1, Spooky 4-1 has your sparkle. Cleared hot." Emma looked at the advancing Taliban, at her wounded comrades, at Steele, who was still conscious enough to stare at her with something approaching awe. "Spooky 4-1, Ghost 7-1, cleared hot. Bring the rain." The night turned to day as the gunship's weapons opened up. The 25mm Gatling gun sounded like God clearing his throat, followed by the steady thump of the 40mm Bofors cannon. Each burst was precisely placed, following Emma's laser designator as she walked it through the Taliban positions. The human wave assault disintegrated under the overwhelming firepower. Fighters who moments before had been charging were now scrambling for cover that didn't exist. Dust off 3-3. 1 minute out. The medevac helicopter's rotors became audible over the gunfire, but landing would still be dangerous. The LZ was hot, and Taliban fighters were still taking shots from covered positions. That's when the SEALs proved why they were elite. Wounded or not, they formed a perimeter, laying down suppressing fire with the disciplined precision of men who'd done this 100 times before. And in the center of it all was Emma, still working on casualties, still calling in fire support, still doing the impossible. The Black Hawk touched down in a tornado of dust and debris. Emma and Wallace supervised the loading of casualties, prioritizing based on wounds. Steele went first. Despite everything, his injuries were the most life-threatening. As they loaded him, he grabbed Emma's arm with surprising strength. "Cooper," he gasped through the pain. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Didn't understand." She met his eyes, and for the first time since this ordeal began, allowed a hint of emotion to show. Save your strength, Lieutenant. You can apologize properly when you're not holding your guts in. But there was no heat in her words, and Steele managed what might have been a smile before the morphine pulled him under. More helicopters arrived, Apaches providing cover, additional Blackhawks for the walking wounded. As they lifted off, Emma finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. Her hands were covered in blood, Steele's, Peterson's, her own from cuts she hadn't noticed. Her uniform was torn and burned, equipment scattered or expended. But they were alive, all of them. Even the ones who had tried to break her. Jenkins sat across from her in the Black Hawk, staring with an expression caught between awe and shame. "That frequency you used," he said, having to shout over the rotors. "Those call signs. Ghost 7-1. That's—" He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. "That's classified," Emma finished for him, her voice carrying despite the noise. "And it's going to stay that way. But the way you moved, the shooting, the medical procedures, no medic can do that. No regular medic." He paused, swallowing hard. "Who are you, really?" Emma looked out the window at the Afghan mountains falling away below them, at the pillar of smoke still rising from the ambush site. She thought about the note in her pocket, about Building 3's basement, about secrets that were better left buried. But these men had bled beside her now. They'd earned a piece of the truth. "I'm someone who made a promise," she said finally, "to always bring everyone home no matter what it cost." The rest of the flight passed in silence, each man lost in his own thoughts. They had gone into that valley with a medic they had despised, tried to break, treated as less than human. They were coming out, owing their lives to someone who'd proven herself more warrior than any of them had imagined. Part 3. The Revelation. At the field hospital, controlled chaos reigned as doctors and nurses swarmed over the casualties. Emma supervised the handoff, providing detailed reports on each patient's condition and the interventions she'd performed. The receiving surgeon, a major with 20 years of experience, listened with growing amazement. "You performed a bowel repair under fire with basic field equipment?" He examined Steele's sutures, shaking his head. This is work I'd expect from a trauma surgeon, not a field medic." "Where did you train?" "Here and there," Emma replied, deflecting as she always did. "He needs a full exploratory laparotomy, but he'll make it. The repair will hold." The major stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll make sure the surgical team knows they're following up on expert work." As he walked away, Emma heard him mutter to a colleague, "That's not field medicine. That's art." But she was already moving, checking on the other casualties, ensuring each one was stable. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Her hands had finally begun to shake, not from fear, but from the delayed reaction of a body pushed beyond its limits. "Sergeant Carter." The voice belonged to Colonel Harrison, who'd arrived at the hospital as soon as word of the ambush reached the FOB. "I need to speak with you privately." Emma followed him to an empty office, noting the folder in the colonel's hands. Her stomach tightened. How much did Harrison know? How much had been reported? The colonel closed the door and turned to face her, expression unreadable. "I've been receiving some interesting radio transcripts," he began. "Authentication codes that shouldn't exist, call signs that were supposedly retired 3 years ago, and a certain AC-130 crew that's very curious about who exactly was directing their fire with such precision." Emma remained silent. Sometimes the best defense was no defense at all. Harrison continued, "I also have 12 SEALs who owe their lives to a medic they tried to destroy. Men who are now telling anyone who will listen about abilities that go far beyond medical training." He opened the folder. Revealing a document marked with classification stamps Emma recognized all too well. "So I did some digging, made some calls to people who don't officially exist. Imagine my surprise when they confirmed that Ghost 7-1 was not only real but was listed as KIA 3 years ago." The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Finally, Emma spoke. "I was told my past was buried, that I could start over." Harrison's expression softened slightly. "It was, but actions like today have a way of resurrecting the dead. The question now is what we do about it." He closed the folder, seeming to come to a decision. For now, nothing. The after-action report will reflect exemplary performance by a combat medic under fire. The unusual aspects will be attributed to the fog of war. But Emma, he used her first name for the first time, the SEALs know. They may not know the details, but they know you're not what you appear. That secret's out. Emma nodded, exhaustion making her shoulders sag. I understand, sir. I'll put in for a transfer. You'll do no such thing, Harrison interrupted. Do you know what those men are saying? Steele woke up during surgery prep. His first words were asking if you were okay. Jenkins is writing you up for a Silver Star. Rodriguez wants you assigned permanently to their team. He paused, letting that sink in. You've gone from pariah to patron saint in one firefight. Transfers are the last thing on anyone's mind. A knock on the door interrupted them. Come, Harrison called. Wallace entered, still in his blood-stained gear. Sorry to interrupt, sir, but Sergeant Carter needs to know. Steele's out of surgery. He's stable. Asking to see her when she has a chance. He paused, looking at Emma with something approaching reverence. The surgeon said your field repair saved his life. Another 10 minutes and... He shook his head. Anyway, thought you should know. After he left, Harrison stood. Get some rest, Sergeant. That's an order. We'll figure out the rest later. But as Emma turned to leave, the colonel's voice stopped her. One more thing. Building 3's basement. Whatever's there, whatever secret someone wanted you to find, be careful. Some stones are better left unturned. Emma's hand found the note in her pocket. How did Harrison know? But the colonel was already dismissing her, the conversation over. The mystery deepened, but exhaustion was winning. She needed sleep. Tomorrow would bring questions, investigations, reports. But tonight, she'd saved them all. The ones who'd hated her, humiliated her, tried to break her, she'd saved them anyway because that's what warriors did. Not for glory or recognition, but because it was right. The barracks were quiet at 300 hours when Emma finally made her way to Building 3. Her body moved on autopilot, muscle memory navigating the darkened paths of FOB Chapman. She'd showered twice, but she could still smell the copper tang of blood, still feel the heat of the burning Humvee on her skin. The basement door was unlocked, the stairs leading down into darkness that seemed thicker than mere absence of light. She descended carefully, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. The basement was larger than expected, extending well beyond the building's footprint. File cabinets lined one wall, their locks broken, contents rifled through. But it was the far wall that made her breath catch. Photographs. Dozens of them. Pinned to boards like some investigative journalist's conspiracy wall. And in every photo, operators she recognized, not by face. Their features were always obscured by balaclavas or shadow, but by stance, by gear, by the small details that separated elite warriors from merely excellent ones. Ghost operators, her brothers and sisters in arms, the ones who were supposed to have died with her. I knew you'd come. Kate Miller's voice from the shadows didn't surprise her. Somehow Emma had expected this. The sergeant stepped into the light, but her bearing was different now. Professional, dangerous. Sorry about the deception, but I needed to evaluate you first. Make sure you were who the files said you were. She gestured at the photographs. Been collecting these for 2 years. Every time a mysterious operator shows up in after-action reports. Every time impossible shots get made or miraculous medical saves happen in places where they shouldn't. She fixed Emma with a steady gaze. The ghosts aren't dead, are they? Emma examined the photos more closely. Kandahar, Helmand, operations in Syria and Iraq that never made the news. In each one, operators bearing the subtle hallmarks of ghost training. They'd scattered to the wind after that night, gone underground, become different people. But they couldn't stop being who they were. Warriors didn't just forget a lifetime of training because someone stamped deceased on their file. Why? Emma asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Because someone killed an entire unit of America's most elite operators and covered it up. Because the official story is bullshit. Because the truth needs to come out. Miller moved to another board. This one covered with official documents, most heavily redacted. Operation Twilight Hammer? Ring any bells? The name hit Emma like a physical blow. She was back there suddenly, in that compound in Pakistan, where everything went wrong, where they'd been sent to die by someone who'd wanted the ghost unit erased. The mission that never happened in a place that didn't exist, where 8 of America's finest warriors had perished. "We were betrayed," Emma said, the words coming out harsh and ragged. "Sold out. The intel was deliberately false. The compound was a trap. They knew we were coming." She touched one of the photos, recognizing the stance of Ghost 1-4 despite the grainy quality. "We lost 8 that night. The rest of us, we were given a choice. Die officially and disappear or die for real. New identities, new lives, but we could never be ghosts again. Never work together, never investigate what happened." Miller nodded slowly. "But you're investigating now. By revealing yourself yesterday, by using those call signs, you've broken your agreement. They'll come for you." Emma smiled, but it held no warmth. "Let them come. I've spent 3 years pretending to be less than I am, hiding, playing small. Yesterday reminded me who I really am, what I'm capable of." She turned to face Miller fully. "But why do you care? What's your stake in this?" "My brother was Ghost 9, Miller said quietly. "He didn't make it out of that compound. They gave us a flag and a story about a training accident. Mom still thinks he died because of equipment failure." Her voice hardened. "I've spent 2 years putting pieces together, waiting for one of you to surface. When your assignment came through, when I saw certain anomalies in your file, I hoped, and yesterday confirmed it." The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them both freeze. Too heavy for one person. Multiple contacts moving with tactical precision. Emma pushed Miller behind a file cabinet and positioned herself with clear sightlines to both the stairs and a ventilation grate that might serve as an escape route. Old habits, never truly buried, just dormant. The first figure appeared, weapon at the ready, and Emma's tension eased fractionally. Wallace, followed by Rodriguez and 3 other SEALs. They spread out professionally, securing the room before Wallace spoke. "Figured we'd find you here. Jenkins saw you heading this way." "This is a private conversation," Emma said, but there was no real heat in it. These men had earned certain truths. Wallace holstered his weapon. "Not anymore, it's not. You saved our asses yesterday. That makes your problems our problems." He looked around the basement, taking in the photographs, the documents. "Jesus, this is about the ghosts, isn't it? The unit that got wiped out 3 years ago." Rodriguez moved closer to the photographs, studying them with professional interest. "Except they didn't all get wiped out. You're proof of that." He turned to Emma. "So what really happened?" Before she could answer, another voice came from the stairs. "What happened was a black operation that went exactly as planned." They all spun toward the new arrival. A man in civilian clothes, but his bearing screamed military. High-ranking military. He descended slowly, hands visible, but radiating the confidence of someone who didn't need weapons to be dangerous. "Sergeant Carter, or should I say Ghost 7-1, you've been a hard woman to find." Emma recognized him now. General Robert Maxwell, Deputy Director of Special Operations Command. The man who had signed off on Operation Twilight Hammer. The man who'd sent her unit to die. "General," her voice was steady despite the rage building in her chest. "Come to finish what you started?" Maxwell smiled, cold and sharp. "On the contrary, I came to thank you. Your performance yesterday, broadcast across tactical nets, recorded by multiple units. You've given me exactly what I needed." He gestured at the basement's contents. "All of this. The investigation, it's exactly what we hoped would happen when we kept some of you alive." The room erupted. Wallace and Rodriguez moved to flank Emma, their loyalty to her overriding years of military conditioning. The other SEALs looked confused but followed their senior NCO's lead. Miller emerged from behind the cabinet, her hand resting on a sidearm Emma hadn't known she carried. "You wanted us to investigate?" Emma's mind raced, piecing together 3 years of subterfuge. "You wanted us to surface. Why?" "Because the real traitors are still out there," Maxwell said simply. The ones who actually betrayed your unit, who have been selling operational intelligence to the highest bidder. We needed bait. Ghosts who were supposedly dead but might surface if pressed. Ghosts who would draw the traitors out. He pulled out a tablet showing satellite imagery of the ambush site from yesterday. Your convoy wasn't randomly attacked. The route, the timing, the forces arrayed against you. All of it was orchestrated. Someone wanted to confirm if Ghost 71 was really Emma Carter. And now they know. You used me as bait? Emma's voice was dangerously quiet. Used all of us? Maxwell shrugged. You volunteered for hazardous duty the day you joined the military. This is just another form of service. He looked at the SEALs. All of you are now part of this, whether you want to be or not. The people hunting the ghosts don't care about collateral damage. So what now? Rodriguez asked, his hand resting on his weapon. We just wait for these traitors to come kill us? Maxwell smiled again, and this time it held a hint of genuine warmth. No, Master Chief, now we hunt. The ghosts are being reactivated, unofficially, of course. Sergeant Carter's spectacular display yesterday has forced our enemies to move. They'll try to eliminate her before she can connect with other survivors, but they don't know she's not alone anymore. He looked at each of them in turn. You want the truth about what happened? Help us find it? You want justice for the ghosts who died? Help us deliver it. And if we refuse? Wallace asked. Maxwell shrugged. Then you go back to your lives. Pretend this never happened, and hope the people hunting ghosts don't decide you know too much. The basement fell silent, except for the hum of ventilation and the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Emma looked at the men who had gone from tormentors to protectors in the span of a single firefight. Saw the decision in their eyes before they spoke. We're in, Rodriguez said simply. The others nodded agreement. Maxwell turned to Miller. Sergeant Miller, your investigation has been noted. Your brother would be proud. Consider yourself recruited. Finally, he faced Emma. Ghost 7-1. Your official death is being reversed. Your team needs you. Your country needs you. Will you answer the call? Emma thought of 3 years of hiding, of pretending to be less than she was, of the 8 ghosts who'd died that night and the ones still out there, scattered and alone, of the traitors who'd sold them out and were still free. Her decision was made before he finished speaking. When do we start? Maxwell checked his watch. Transport arrives in 6 hours. Collect your gear. Say your goodbyes. You're going dark. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sergeant, Lieutenant Steele is asking for you. Might want to handle that before you disappear again. After Maxwell left, the basement erupted in questions and planning, but Emma slipped away, leaving the others to process what they had learned. She had one last duty to perform. The hospital was quieter now, most of the critical cases stabilized. She found Steele in a private room, his massive frame looking somehow diminished by the machines keeping him alive. His eyes opened as she entered, focusing with effort. Cooper. His voice was weak but clear. They said I died twice on the table. That your field surgery was the only thing that kept me stable enough to survive. Emma pulled a chair close to his bed. You're tough to kill, Lieutenant. Too stubborn to die. He attempted a laugh that turned into a cough. Yeah. Well, I owe you more than my life. I owe you an apology. A real one. His eyes, those same eyes that had blazed with contempt just 24 hours ago, now held genuine remorse. I was wrong about everything. You're more warrior than I'll ever be. You don't know that, Emma said quietly. But Steele shook his head. I heard the comms, Ghost 7-1. I know what that means, what that unit was. He struggled to sit up straighter. My uncle was special operations. He told me stories, said the ghosts were the best we had, said losing them was like cutting off our own sword hand. He met her eyes. I'm sorry for everything, and I'm honored to have served with you, even if I was too stupid to know it at the time. Emma felt something ease in her chest, a knot she hadn't realized was there. We all have our ghosts, Lieutenant. The trick is learning to live with them. She stood to leave, but his hand caught hers. Will I see you again? There was something almost vulnerable in his voice. I mean, the team. We could use someone like you. She squeezed his hand gently. Take care of yourself, Steele. Take care of the team. She paused at the door. And remember, real strength isn't about size or muscle or how loud you can yell. It's about being willing to bleed for the person next to you, even when they don't deserve it. She left him there, staring after her with eyes full of questions she couldn't answer. The morning sun was just breaking over the mountains as Emma stood on the flight line, her gear packed, her new identity documents in hand. The SEALs who had volunteered stood with her, a small band of brothers forged in fire and bound by secrets. Miller was there too, her brother's dog tags visible around her neck. So what do we call you now? Jenkins asked. Cooper? Ghost 71? Something else? Emma considered the question as a black helicopter appeared on the horizon. No markings, no identification. Call me what I've always been, she said finally. A warrior who keeps her promises. The helicopter touched down, and they boarded in silence. As it lifted off, Emma took one last look at F. Abby Chapman, at the place where she'd been broken and reborn. Below, she could see Building 3, its secrets now part of a larger web of lies and truth. But then something caught her eye. A figure on the roof of the Tactical Operations Center, watching the helicopter leave. The distance was too great to make out features, but something about the stance. Another ghost? Or one of the traitors Maxwell had warned about? She filed the image away, another puzzle piece. As the helicopter banked east toward the rising sun, Emma felt the weight of her new-old identity settling around her like familiar armor. The medic was gone. Ghost 71 was back, and this time, she wasn't running from the shadows. She was becoming them. The radio crackled with encrypted chatter, coordinates, and call signs that officially didn't exist. But one transmission made her blood run cold. A voice she recognized, one that shouldn't have been possible. Ghost 71, this is Ghost 33. Welcome back to the land of the living. We've been waiting. The transmission cut off, but the implications hung in the air like smoke. More ghosts were out there. The question was, friend or foe? Wallace, monitoring the same frequency, looked at her with raised eyebrows. Ghost 33 was reported KIA in Twilight Hammer. Emma nodded slowly. So was I. Death, it seems, is negotiable in our line of work. Her secure phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Don't trust Maxwell. Find me in Damascus. G17. She erased it immediately, her mind racing. If not Maxwell, then who and why? She turned to face her new team, these men who'd chosen to follow her into the shadows. Last chance to back out. Where we're going. What we're about to do. There's no coming back from it. Rodriguez spoke for all of them. We've got your six, Ghost. Lead the way. The helicopter carried them toward an unrecorded war against enemies without uniforms. For Emma Carter, Ghost 7-1, it felt like coming home. Yesterday's firefight proved what she'd always known. You can't kill what refuses to die. Today, the hunt began. And somewhere out there, traitors who thought they'd buried their secrets were about to learn that the dead don't always stay buried. Real warriors are forged in silence, revealed in chaos, and defined by what they do when no one's watching. And Emma Carter was about to show the world what a real warrior could do.